Welcome back, everybody. So we are here for another episode of JaAR. JaAR standing for those of you that are new, Joe.
And Amy.
Review. And we are here once again to talk about the Shadows over Innistrad story. The set has released. We have opened a ton of product. You guys should definitely go check that out on the calendar. We're not going to necessarily be talking about what cool stuff we opened in this video. What we're here to talk about are the stories themselves and show off our hashtag Vorthos Pride.
Yeah.
Amy really wants that to be a thing. I also would like that to be a thing. So
desperately want
yes,
that to be a
so
thing.
Definitely show us.
It's sad how much I want that to be a thing.
Show us your hashtag Vorthos Pride. You can check us out Facebook and Twitter. Those links are in the description. But we are here today to talk about the story Promises, Old and New. We get to see Sorin for the first time in Shadows over Innistrad, at least. We've heard him talked about a lot. We've seen his manner and what has happened to it. And we've now found out, at least for me, a lot of questions for me got answered in this one and the main one was why Nahiri is so angry. What happened that Nahiri got so upset? And to be honest, it was very much kind of almost an immediate shift. And if I didn't personally think that all of these cryptoliths were her fault, I would think that it would be very apropos of what's happening on Innistrad and that people are going crazy, but, you know, just going from 0 to 100 in terms of not angry to super angry. But since I believe that she is the one who is bringing the cryptoliths out and directing all of the energy to this one area, and that kind of melds into last week's story and etc. But that's kind of where I'm at this point. But she kind of goes from, oh my God, Sorin, it's so great to see you, glad that you're safe, glad that you're okay, to, you know, wait a minute, why didn't you come help us? Because you were here? Okay, but you told me to bring the Eldrazi to Zendikar, my plane, and that was super dangerous, and now you don't even come when I call you, even though you said you would. So she's getting a little pissed off.
Yeah.
You know, and Sorin even seems to be regretful, but at the same time also scared because he's kind of finding out what she can do.
Yeah.
Because the last time he saw her, which he said was millennia ago, which is awesome. Just the fact that, like, that's how much time spans.
Not really, because that's how much time he left her alone after she freaking called him to come and help her out.
Yeah.
And he just wasn't fucking there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, I mean, that's not good for her. And that kind of...
he was kind of a jerk to her when she was like, hey, man, what the hell?
Yeah.
He was just like, well, you know, I know best. Fuck you.
And that seems kind of like Sorin's MO, is that, like, look, I'm a lot older than all of you. I know a lot better than all of you. And so, you know, and he kind of tries to pull the same thing with Olivia, because we kind of jump back and forth in this story, which I actually really appreciate. I liked the way they did it. It never seemed confusing in, you know, when they were jumping around.
I usually complain about that.
I know, and that's why I'm making a point of referencing it now, is because they did it really well this time with jumping back and forth. It was very clear that, you know, what was the past, what was the present, what was back to the past, and they go back and forth with it. And again, to me, it was very clear. Sometimes when they do that, they might not, like, visually, I mean, I was the one reading it, Amy was not, but visually it was very simple because it always had the kind of the line going across to indicate a change in either scene or perspective is how they usually use it. If we're getting into technical terms of storytelling, they usually use that line to indicate a change of scene or a change of perspective. So if we're going and looking from a different person's point of view, they'll usually use that line to change story. This time they did that, as well as making all of the text from the past in italics.
Oh.
So it was regular font to italic font.
And that was confusing for me, because I remember saying to you, wait a minute, what?
Yeah.
And you having to be, this is the old Avison, not the current Avison.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, okay, because I thought they were just going to be dead now.
Well, but cause she's referring to when Avison showed up at that one point. And to be honest, though, when there was a question still in my mind, I mean, they were at the Hell Vault, and so because the Hell Vault was still there, you can kind of glean from it that they were in the past before the Hell Vault was destroyed, and Avacyn and Gristlebrand came out of it, and so it had to have been the good Avacyn because she wasn't evil before she was put in and then burst forth from it. But kind of knowing that is still in and of itself a conclusion that you have to draw while listening to it, because there's such a switch, and this is where I get upset and annoyed, but where I kind of lose track is it goes from kind of, oh, well, you know, we talk about Avacyn in the past and now we're talking about Avacyn in the present in terms of how, like, her red-tipped hair and her red-tipped wings, and she's crazy now and her pupils are all black, and but going into the past, you know, they kind of say, oh, well, in the past all of this stuff happened, but they're still talking about crazy Avacyn, even though they're talking about the past. So it kind of jumps around, and you never know how far back they're jumping or how not far back they're jumping. So it's hard to tell how long Avacyn's been crazy, whether we're in the past, whether we're in the present. And I guess you could argue that that's because of everyone going nuts on Innistrad, so nobody really knows how long it's been since they've been going crazy. But at the same time, from the outside looking in, that's difficult to discern what we're talking about. And a lot of times recently in kind of pop culture, we've been kind of presented with movies. So the ones that I can think of, because we're geeks, if you didn't get that, the ones that I can think of are the new Star Wars movies and kind of all of the Marvel and DC movies that are coming out now that are attempting to build a world. A lot of the reviews of those movies end with, you know, or have people say, I didn't really necessarily like this one part, but we'll have to see in the next movie. And that's really what it is in terms of these stories for me, which is, I don't really like that they're jumping around so much, but we'll have to see if they can tie it all in together.
Right.
And so, and I think, I don't like that form of storytelling, but it seems to be the norm right now, so I don't...
I like it a lot.
Okay.
Because it's a lot less boring.
Because it meaning gives you something to look forward to, you mean?
No, I mean, like, it... This is gonna sound funny, but it's just more like the way I think.
Okay. Kind of scattered like that?
All over the place.
Okay.
You know, that, you know, mirrors what's going on in my mind. And, you know.
All right. So
it's easy for me to follow.
Well, and I was going to say, I mean, I clearly don't fault the writing staff or the Wizards of the Coast writing staff for doing it this way, because, as I said, it's clearly the norm right now. I mean, that's just what everything is that, you know, well, this was really good on its own, but it was a little confusing, so we'll have to wait for the next thing. And I personally don't appreciate that, and it is purely my own personal opinion, which is what we're sitting here doing, is sharing our opinions. And, you know, as always, let us know what you think. Do you agree more with Amy in that that's okay because you feel like your life is scattered like that? Or are you closer towards me with, like, I just don't appreciate that not being able to look at one piece of the story and say, this was good, this wasn't good, as opposed to having to say, this was good, but we'll have to see in the future, or this wasn't good, but it could get better, or somewhere in between. As always, I know Amy's super into, like, let us know in the comments, like, we want to hear your opinions and stuff.
Well, I also think that kind of mirrors the state of the plane. It's very chaotic.
Madness, absolutely.
And, just, I don't know, it feels right.
Yeah, and I don't, especially because at this point, Innistrad kind of in general has always been like going from one crisis to the next, you know, dealing with before Avacyn in general, and then after Avacyn, and then after Avacyn was in the Hell Vault, and so they were all being attacked while she was in the Hell Vault, and then she was released from the Hell Vault, and then she started going crazy, and then they started going crazy, and there's like sacrifices and vampires and werewolves and zombies, and so being a human on Innistrad has kind of always been the worst, right? Like, it's just a terrible place to be a human, but of course, if you're not a Planeswalker, you're not leaving. You just have to try to stay alive, and not become a lycanthrope or a vampire or dead and become a reanimated corpse, get sacrificed to the Gitrog. Like, it's just so many different things. So yes, I can see how...
Just try to live.
Well, right, and I can see how...
Get to the next day.
Yeah, and I can see how not understanding how long this crisis has been plaguing the area makes perfect sense, right? Because it's been crisis after crisis after crisis, and you're like, oh, how long has this one been going on? I don't remember. I'm just trying to live day to day.
Right.
I'm just trying to be here tomorrow.
But there's also the way of thinking where you could say, well, maybe it's been happening for much longer, but it was taking all of these little bits and pieces, falling into the right place at the right time before it could actually do something.
Well, and we're all seeing it from the perspective of everything switches when Avacyn goes crazy. But she was locked up in the Hell Vault, so maybe it was going on while she was in there too. Like, who knows?
Yeah, and there's still a reason why she went crazy, and we don't really know that yet.
I think...
Because what we do know about it is pretty vague and still seemingly not really something that would make that happen.
Yeah. Because at this point, we're looking into cryptoliths. Jace thinks that it is Liliana, which I think is part of his madness leading him in that direction, because the last time we saw, when we saw him at the end of him in Markov Manor, he was regaining his sanity, and then at the end when he was in the Drown Yard, he was just insane, I feel like. I don't think he was crazy at Markov Manor. While he was in Markov Manor, you don't think he was? Okay, you think he was just being influenced by...
Yeah, I mean, I think there were ghosts in there that were just making things difficult for him. I don't think he was crazy.
No, that's fair. I mean, I guess just not himself is really more what I'm trying to say.
And I think that actually happened in a more gradual manner, because I think when he was at Markov Manor, he was being influenced by ghosts, and it was, like I said, just getting really hard for him to, I don't know, see things correctly, kind of. And then it gradually became, he's talking to the journal more, and he is, getting angry at the fact that he's not understanding what's in the journal, and yelling at the journal, and I feel like it was gradual. And it didn't necessarily start at Markov Manor. It started once he left.
Yeah. And I have to say, and then once he left, then I feel like it was gradual for a period and then just kind of right into it. Like, oh, I went into this woman's mind and now I'm trapped and I'm looking at giant versions of myself, but they're different. And then later on, and he's like, well, those are weird. And then later on, he just makes them, even though he just talked about how they were weird. So he's not really in control.
He couldn't control it anymore.
He's just not in control of himself. So anyway, that was last week's story. But in terms of this week, I mean, it's good though. I mean, right? You got to talk about them all together because it's all happening on the same plane.
It's a sequence.
Although, and they're putting it in this sequence deliberately, clearly, because I was sitting here going, okay, well, where's Sorin? And they mention in this one that Jace in Markov Manor had just missed Sorin.
Yeah.
So Sorin was there, saw the declaration in stone that was left by Nahiri, and then went to Olivia. And it seems like, what I think is interesting is, he's going to Olivia asking for help to deal with Nahiri, not Avacyn.
Right.
He wasn't asking for help against Avacyn, which... When I looked at the set and I looked at the cards, especially because the set released and the spoilers happened after I had read the story where Arlen Cord presented herself and said to the hunters, stop hunting us werewolves, you're going to need us against the angels. Yeah. So I just assumed that when I saw the card Olivia mobilized for war, that she was going to war against the angels.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily seem like that's the case. Maybe it does change into that, but based on Sorin coming to her and asking for help, right now, he's asking for help against Nahiri. So presumably...
I almost get the impression that he doesn't know that Avacyn is...
I don't know, because there is that one point where he mentions her, and, like, Olivia kind of changes her demeanor, so at least... I think at least they're aware of it, but maybe Sorin's just like, well, it was my creation, and especially kind of with his feelings of, you know, superiority, there's no way he could have created something that would be that crazy, so why would he kind of reference the fact that it's going crazy? I don't
disagree.
either.
I really disagree. I think he doesn't know.
Okay, it's all speculation for me. I may have misread, you know, but whatever. I mean, obviously, again, we will see as it comes up in the future. One of the things that I liked from this story, though, that I wanted to point out was, for one of the first times, I mean, every story ends with you being like, ooh, cool, I'm curious to know what happens next week. But this one, I think, ended with us saying, or me at least, excuse me, saying, now I need to know what she's laughing about. Olivia is talking to Sorin. Sorin asks for her help. She laughs. And she says, I'll help you. You help me with something first. What's she talking about? You know, what is...
The nasty.
I doubt it. Highly doubt it. They were kind of playing coy with one another, which is very similar to what Jace and Liliana were doing with each other in the earlier story, in that
I don't know.
they were kind of doing the dance and whatever, you know, like the metaphorical dance, like verbally. Not the horizontal dance. What the hell do you think I'm talking about? I also really appreciated that almost as soon as, now that the set has released, almost as soon as they started telling the story of the inside of Olivia's home, in my mind, I'm picturing all of the cards that I've now seen from the set. Mm-hmm. Stensia Masquerade popped into my head almost immediately. Amy mentioned the insolent neonate sitting on the table with his leg up or whatever. Those images popped into our minds, and that's really good. So, I mean, I've said that I want the stories out before the cards are released or spoiled, because I want to know the story without the cards spoiling them for me. But at the same time, I guess it's important that to kind of get... I really appreciated that. Being able to read this story and be like, oh wow, that's where Stensia Masquerade comes from. Right. Oh wow, that's where the insolent neonate is.
I like it better this direction, I guess I'll say, because I like being able to rethink of the art on the cards as sort of a way to picture the world in my head as he's reading it.
And the other thing is, I talked about Stensia Masquerade and I talked about the Insolent Neonate. Neither of those two cards were images in this story. They had two, I believe, images from original Innistrad that I was showing to Amy. Vampiric Rites, I think, was one of them, and clearly the original Olivia picture, which has her floating in midair with a glass of blood, and people in masks, you know, or with masks over their faces, kind of standing all around her as she floats up in the air, which is something that happened in this story. So whether or not they did that on purpose to duplicate that image, or whether she just does that frequently at these parties that she has, I'm not really sure, but it was clearly her picture from old Innistrad, and the same thing with what I think is Vampiric Rites. Correct me if I'm wrong on the name, but that was the other picture that they showed, was, you know, the vampires kind of drinking the blood from the arm, and they discuss that imagery in this story as well, and that Sorin's walking by and sees a bunch of vampires in like a room by themselves kind of drinking the blood of what I guess is a human that they're feasting on. And so those two images were from that set and that story, but then they showed the Vampire Noble, which is from this set, the vanilla creature, and yet they didn't show Stensia Masquerade, and they didn't show the Insolent Neonate. And they could have, because again, it evoked those images in our minds when we were hearing the story. So They could have. They didn't, which is fine, obviously, because we were still able to think of it that way. But it's very interesting, the choices that they made, because I felt like there were pictures a lot more frequently in this story, and because of that, it made it a little bit shorter than the long ones have been. But I thought that this one was chock full of information. We got to see Sorin for the first time, Olivia for the first time, and Nahiri for the first time. We saw Avacyn, but we've clearly seen her in other stories in this set, or in this block. But we got to see Sorin, Nahiri, and Olivia for the first time, although we got to see only Nahiri in the past. We have not seen present Nahiri yet, technically.
And I think going back to what you said about the pictures, I think they did that in an effort to kind of remind us what the old Innistrad was and was like, because there was so much going back to it in this story.
Well, and interestingly, because we now know, or because we are now being reminded, some of us did know, but because we are now being reminded of what old Innistrad was, seemingly, it all depends on when this is all happening, but seemingly because Sorin, or Jace just missed Sorin at the Manor, you can kind of glean approximately when this is happening, and that it should all be happening at about the same time that Jace is at the Drowned Temple, in that with Sorin talking to Olivia. And because of that, with all of the madness plaguing Innistrad right now, the vampires seem to be completely unaffected.
Yeah.
They are doing almost nothing different.
Right.
You know? I mean, except for the dudes chilling in the walls at Markov Manor, that's a little different. But everyone else...
didn't want to be doing that.
Right. But everybody else, they're still having the same parties they were having, whatever, I think 3 years ago, or whenever original Innistrad occurred in the timeline. They're still doing the exact same thing. You know, maybe they're feeding on people a little bit more willingly now because Avacyn's not there to stop them. But Avacyn wasn't there to stop them when she was in the Hell Vault either. So it's very interesting that they are the ones who are not affected, and that Sorin is coming in and kind of receiving the ire of all of these vampires. Kind of having them say, like, whispers about him and stuff. I loved... It was one of the pictures that they showed was for the Judge promo of the card Vindicate. Now, if you moused over the word Vindicate where it would usually show the card, it didn't show the Judge promo, it showed the original, which I believe was the Weatherlight, kind of flying away from something. But it's the Vindicate card, which is great, but it was that picture of Sorin kind of closing his hand and turning that one vampire to dust.
It was a pretty cool picture.
Oh, it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. And it was the first time I had personally seen that one. A lot of the other ones, it was like, oh, right, these are cards from either original Innistrad or Shadows over Innistrad that now I've seen all of. But this was one that I don't know that I'd ever seen that Judge promo before. And hearing it described in the story and then immediately seeing it as a picture as well, the description was amazing in and of itself.
I really like that picture because to me it looks like he's like snapping and basically vaporizing a guy. Yes,
that was Amy's take on it, was that he was snapping his fingers. I kind of thought he was being theatric and kind of closing his hand like that, and kind of like bringing each of his fingers in individually. But either way, it does look like a really awesome shot. The last thing I personally wanted to say about this story was that I thought that the descriptions of the fighting was really good in this one. I am a person who enjoys comics and a person who enjoys novels about comic book characters, and so clearly you don't have the pictures to back up what's happening. You have to have it described for you. And I thought that in the other stories, they didn't necessarily do combat super well. It didn't evoke kind of the immediacy of needing to defend yourself as well as attack back.
Well, and I think that's kind of the point. You know, we were easing into that because we hadn't been in the world that long.
Right.
And it was still the shittiness of the combat that was gonna happen was still building and building, and eventually it will come to a head, and it's going to be intense, but it hasn't gotten to that point yet.
Well, yeah, I mean, but I just really appreciated reading about Sorin fighting, it was very one-sided, but dealing with the vampires that Olivia sends after him to make him leave, and he just kills 5 of them and then turns the other one to dust. And then when they go to the past, or when Sorin goes back into his memories, kind of hearing about the fight between Nahiri and Avacyn, and then, him kind of stepping in at the last second or whatever, that was very much, like, I kind of almost felt my own adrenaline pumping reading that with oh my god, they're fighting and this is happening and this is happening. And at the same time, like, it's one of those fights that has tension but doesn't, because that none of the 3 people in this fight die because it's the past and they all exist in the present. So they're not dead, but at the same time you love every second of it.
And maybe that's why I experienced that same situation basically the opposite way. Because I looked at you and I was like, well, why is he saying that, he was hoping that it wouldn't come to this? Is she hurt? And he's like, no.
No, but...
He's just, like, got a weapon to her or whatever it is. And I'm like, well, who cares? And it's probably easier for me to have felt that way because of the fact that I know that none of these people really get hurt, and it's not till, now much, much later that they end up actually fighting it out for a real purpose.
Right. And I mean, because Anguish Unmaking is a card, we can assume that one of the 3 of them is gone by the end of the set, right. If not, more. So, yeah, I mean, that's just kind of because the cards spoil the story. So, again, kind of going back to what I was talking about. So, it's a double-edged sword, because I appreciated being able to evoke the images of the cards in my head while reading this story, but at the same time, knowing what's going to happen to Avacyn because of Sorin kind of slightly ruins it for me. Because I know what's going to happen, but everything leading up to it has been fantastic and I'm very much enjoying it, which is clearly why we're not like, this is the last episode because I'm not reading this anymore. We're like, no, I still want to keep going. I still want to find out kind of the nuances that lead up to that, because we haven't seen Nahiri yet. Yeah. And that's kind of a big question mark now, because again, that's kind of my linchpin of my theory, is that Nahiri's doing it and it's not Emrakul, because please God, I don't want it to be Emrakul. I'll go on a rant about that if and when it happens. We'll see. Hopefully I don't have to, but I'm hoping it's Nahiri. And
I think it's Nahiri.
Yeah, I think so too, because the cryptoliths are stone, and she has amazing manipulation of stone. The ability to manipulate stone. And they really described that well here. Keeping the stones in midair, and that they weren't even swaying in the wind. They were just stationary. The fact that she was able to meld into the ground and then just explode up dust and earth while also attacking Avacyn with a sword.
If you think about it, I mean, we did talk about the Eldritch Moon. What is that but stone?
Which they reminded us of, because they said...
A moon is made out of the same material as, the ground.
Yes.
So she can manipulate the stone on Innistrad. Maybe she can also create this Eldritch Moon that, throws off the gravitational pull and pulls of the land and everything else.
And the creatures made of mana, like the angels and
Yeah.
stuff. Well, and don't forget, they remind us, and I think it was very deliberate that they reminded us, that the Hell Vault is made of a piece of the moon.
Okay,
I think that they deliberately told us that in this story, because the Hell Vault is made of a piece of the moon, and Nahiri is found by Sorin when she first comes to Innistrad, kind of caressing the Hell Vault and being at the Hell Vault. So she is analyzing it for herself. She is becoming familiarized with that form of stone, and because her powers are so great, who's to say that they can't grow to in some way manipulate the moon or create a new one? So that's kind of, again, theories, kind of things that we're drawing from it. We'll see if we're correct as the stories keep going. I think that we won't see the conclusion of Nahiri and Sorin until Eldritch Moon, until the set of Eldritch Moon and its stories. I think that that's kind of where it's leading us, in that this story will be ending shortly after the threat of Avacyn is removed.
Yeah, I have to agree with that.
Especially because, you know, they try to show us the 5 story points in the cards, and I think Anguished Unmaking is the 5th and final story point.
I would have to agree with all the stories that we've already read.
Yeah.
It's too slow moving to assume that all of those pieces of the story would be tied off in pretty bows by the end of this particular one.
Well, yeah,
it doesn't make sense.
Right, and again, we have the benefit of knowing that there is a second set coming out.
Right.
We also have the benefit of knowing that that second set is called Eldritch Moon,
Right.
and we have the benefit of knowing that Liliana has been on all of the promo art, so she is going to play at least some kind of a role. But to be honest, Jace was on all the promo art for this set, and he's playing a big role in this set. So
I don't know about that.
all right. I mean, he's finding the journal and he's going through.
I think they wanted to make it seem like he was going to.
Okay. See, my opinion,
I don't agree.
my opinion still is, and I mentioned this in the past episodes as well, but my opinion is that the 2 Planeswalkers that we're going to get in the next set will be Liliana and Tamiyo, just because they're the only 2 that have been mentioned. Some people are speculating that if it's Emrakul, that Emrakul could come back as a Planeswalker.
Right.
Once again, please God, no. But, I mean, if it happens, it happens. You know,
Hey, if you disagree, leave it in the comments.
I mean, honestly, do, right? I mean, let us know your theories. Let us know your thoughts. As always, show us your hashtag Vorthos Pride. I love it. I think that's great. I don't have anything else to say on this story. I liked it a lot. I will say that. I think I've said that about almost every one of them. But I thought this story was great. Finally getting to see some of these characters that we haven't seen yet, and seeing them interact with one another was really cool.
I liked that there was so many vampires in it.
Okay.
Which is weird for me to say, because I'm not, I'm Team Jacob. No, I'm just kidding.
She said that before, but only because there are werewolves everywhere.
I said that when we were, reading about like Arland Court or whatever else.
Yes.
But I just thought that was a funny comment to say at that moment. It's not a real thing.
No, it's not.
No, I'm not a Twilight fan. But that aside, I liked the feeling of the story a little bit more, the mood, I guess. It felt a little cooler because it was so vampiric, versus the like, oh, well, here's people going crazy and here's, this gothic scenery. It's like, okay, but where's that feeling of, the enticing playfulness that I assumed I'd get from Innistrad.
And I think it's because, as we were saying, the vampires are not affected by this. So it's literally stepping away from basically everything else we've read about so far, because it's just going back to, kind of life as usual, except now Sorin's showing up and interrupting it and being like, look, you have to help me. This is happening, you have to help.
Up until now, it was very sort of dramatic, and almost seemingly for no reason, because I feel like, maybe I'm a little biased, but I feel like what they were experiencing on Zendikar was of such a magnitude that coming to this story and having it be like, oh, woe is me. It's like, okay, but, over on Zendikar, they're getting their asses kicked by the Eldrazi.
Yeah.
So why do I feel bad for you?
Nice.
And then,
well,
I don't know. And this is the part where I'm like, okay, here's some people who don't give a damn just as much as I don't.
Yeah. And I think that's...
That sounds horrible.
Well, no, because I think that's a good point, right? That was my point, I think, in episode 1, which was they have to make this story seem as relevant as giant alien monsters destroying an entire plane.
You did say that.
How are you going to do that?
Right.
How are you going to go from a threat to the entire multiverse
Right.
that needs to be taken down by 4 planeswalkers combining their abilities together and still almost dying in the process.
And it's still not really taken down if you think about it.
Right.
It's not alleviated in all senses of the word. It's there's still this looming who the hell knows.
Yeah. So and to go from that to like I said, I've mentioned this before, to go from that to werewolves and zombies and vampires, which would be threatening, but following giant alien monsters that are the size of a world, it's not really that threatening anymore.
Take over the sky and like be the sky, like
True.
become the
True.
sky.
Very true.
Like what the hell was that?
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, and it really took those 4 planeswalkers, but logistically it also took Kiora, who's a 5th planeswalker, and you had General Tazri
and General Tazri and
Munda.
Yeah, Munda.
We're getting off track from this story, but it's now you get to see, if you haven't seen or you haven't gotten it from us discussing all of these stories up till now. We truly are Vorthos players. That's what we like. From Oath of the Gatewatch, General Tazri was my favorite card in the set. Is that card good? I bet you it's not. But the art's awesome. The story was awesome. I love Wooburg abilities on cards, so I appreciated that card because of that as well. In this set, my favorite card is one that we have not opened on the channel yet, so I don't want to spoil what it is until we see it. It's a mythic that we're waiting on, and there's only 4 left if you're following along at home. So, you know, who knows, but it's a very flavorful card, which is why I like it so much. But yeah, so I don't like, you know, my favorite card in the set is not necessarily, I'm not going to look at you and I'm not going to say Archangel Avacyn's my favorite card in the set because right now it's $50, you know, or whatever. Like, Archangel Avacyn's a great card and it's super flavorful, and it's going to feel amazing every time you open that card. And that I won't deny or take away from it. But at the same time, it's not my favorite. Because as a Vorthos, that's not what I'm looking for. You know, that's not what I'm looking forward to. As a collector and a guy who enjoys being able to continue to purchase these things that I enjoy, I will enjoy opening an Archangel Avacyn or an Arlen Cord or whatever, because I can then turn around and add those cards to my collection and or trade them in or whatever. Like, that's, you know, one thing in and of itself. But for storyline purposes, there are different cards that I like for different reasons.
Right. And I actually have to say, for the new Avacyn, I think what's going to be coolest above all else with the new Avacyn is the cosplay. Getting to see people, you know, with those costumes and then like the big wings with like the fake blood on the tips of the wings and on the hair, like they'll get like white wigs and then like dip the tips in fake blood. Like, that's gonna be cool.
If any of you guys are going to do that, let us know in the comments below.
I want to do that. I don't really have the money to do that, but I would love to do that.
I don't want to do that.
Really?
I mean, I personally don't want to dress up as Avacyn, no. That's just a personal choice of mine. I think that you would look really good. I think if you guys have, or, you know, dressed up as Avacyn, or you will, again, send it to us on Facebook or Twitter. We're more than happy to share that, because that's amazing. Again, more hashtag Vorthos Pride. That's one way that you can show us your Vorthos Pride.
So seemingly, I feel like I'm much more of a Nahiri kind of gal.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right. Fair enough. I mean...
I don't know yet, because that character in this story is still kind of in its infancy. We don't really know yet.
We haven't seen her yet, so. Although, and I love Evan Irwin. I think Evan Irwin has talked about this. You look at the card Nahiri the Harbinger, she looks pissed. She looks real mad. And we got an inkling of that from her in the past, but now that it's been this long...
She looks real mad, but she looks real happy about how mad she is.
And about what she's just done to Markov Manor as she's walking away from it.
Yeah.
You know, she's like, all right.
She's real happy with herself.
Yeah.
Being that mad.
Yeah. So... we'll see. We'll see how that goes. We will be back, as always, next week for the next episode of JaAR. I have been Joe.
And Amy.
And guys, check out the other stuff on our channel. Subscribe to find out when more of these videos come out. check out the openings. We've had amazing success with these openings. We don't necessarily have to tell you. You can go and look back at the view counts on all of our other videos. Shadows over Innistrad has been our biggest success.
Yes.
We owe it all to you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching, for subscribing, for sharing if that's what you do. It helps us out a lot. It makes us more willing to make stuff like this. We love it. We want to keep sharing it with you. If you have suggestions, comments, concerns, questions, theories, comment section down below, Twitter, Facebook.
If you just want to tell us how ugly we are and how much you hate us, hell, put that in the comments too.
Especially her. Definitely do that. Let us know what you're thinking of this set. Have you guys opened any cool stuff? We have an intro video up just showing people opening cool stuff at the pre-release, which was a lot of fun to make. But anyway, guys, I'm going to close it out here. In whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.